Hey there, folks. It's Jay Frost speaking to you, and really glad to have you back here at the Philanthropy Mastermind Series show, How to Raise. Of course, if you are new to this, you won't know anything about our history, but for those who have been around the block a few times, you'll know that this is a new show where we are taking all of the CFRE accredited training that we offer here through the series and putting it on Thursdays for you. So we appreciate you being here live, or if you're enjoying the recording, enjoying it afterwards. You can look for this programming every single week throughout 2025. We'll be talking more about that in a bit, but first I want to welcome you. And we can see that there are a number of people already saying hello in the chat. Thank you, Cheryl, for already warming that space up. I want to encourage you to join Cheryl and others there in the chat and just say which part of the country or the world that you're from, maybe which organization that you are with and what you do. All of that will be really helpful to our presenter today, as he frames the discussion on the topic, which I know is going to be so important to what you do. Of course, today we're thrilled to have James Meisner with us to lead this session on mastering donor retention, strategies to prevent and recover lapsed donors. Before we even get into that, I'm sure we have a couple things to say to one another on this subject because it is huge in this sector and it's such a big problem, and James is definitely the person to address it. He's the founder and owner of the Kipos Group, a firm dedicated to helping small and mid-sized nonprofits overcome barriers, grow revenue, and expand impact. And so whether you're at a small shop or a big one, I know that you'll benefit from this and be a good participant in the discussion right there in the chat. So thank you to everybody, Alyssa, Autumn, Jennifer, Heather. I'm missing half the names here, Leah, and so forth. And it's hard to read them all as they go by, but we really do appreciate both your being here and participating in this discussion today. James has over 20 years of fundraising leadership, including roles as Senior Vice President of Strategic Engagement at World Relief, and he brings unparalleled expertise in donor development and team building. He has practical, results-driven approach, and that's helped countless organizations to retain donors and thrive. So with that, I want to welcome James Meisner here to, of course, to the series and to How to Raise. James, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Awesome. Jay, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that almost overwhelming introduction. Slightly embarrassing. Great to be here, even though it's, what, 5 degrees, 6 degrees outside where we are right now?
It's cold. It's very, very, very cold. But some people are probably in even colder places. So I guess we can't complain too much.
We can't.
No. So this subject is a big one for you. Why? Why is this a big one for you?
When you think about it, and we'll get into the details here, and you realize that more than half of donors to organizations don't give again, you start to realize, wow, that's so bad on multiple fronts. One, it's bad for the donors. When donors give, they just have so much joy in doing it, and something erodes that joy and erodes that trust. And we need to fix that from the donor's point of view. But from an organizational and business point of view, it's a huge waste of resource and money when you're losing more than half of your donors every single year. And so we need to fix it as a sector. Everybody keeps talking about people don't trust institutions anymore. Well, a lot of times that's the institution's fault, and we can do some things about it, which is why I'm glad to be here and talking about this today.
This must be something you've encountered personally at organizations where you've worked, as well as places that you've consulted to.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I was head of fundraising at World Relief, which is a global humanitarian organization. And when I started, I was shocked at the retention rate in the organization. And
how was it? What was it like?
In the different segments, it was different, but in our annual fund segment, Jay, it was at 25% when I started. 3 out of every 4 donors were leaving. Okay. You can't build a fundraising engine and expand your impact that way. You just can't. And we eventually got it into the 70s. It was great, but it took us a while to get there. And we did some really specific things to grow it. And that was across all channels. And it was phenomenal. And almost every client I work with, under 50%. It's just abysmal how few of our donors that we're retaining.
It's very expensive. I mean, it's terrible in terms of trust. It's terrible in terms of revenue, but it's so expensive to try and replace these people.
That's right. And when you think of all the ways that people now acquire donors, let's just think digitally.
Mhm.
10, 15 years ago, it was rather inexpensive to acquire a new donor digitally. That has skyrocketed, that cost per acquisition price. So we need to fix this to build trust, but also just to grow revenue, to expand the impact of all these wonderful organizations that are on the call today.
James, before you begin, because I know you have a lot to share, do you mind if I ask people kind of informally, poll the audience here
Yeah,
about what kind of
absolutely.
retention rates that they're getting? And now it's possible also that they don't know a precise percentage, or they may not want to share it, but we would really love to see that. So if you can in the chat, just let us know what you think your retention rate is. That would be really helpful as kind of a framing device. And then we can figure out if your experience is sort of like James's was when he began. And so we're seeing things like with one person who's saying it's at 84% for major donors, another one saying it's 74%, and then someone else currently 30% for the year. That's a big difference between the major donor
Yeah.
population and the general. Probably around 25%, but increasing. It's good to be increasing. Retention rate isn't bad, but recently lost our biggest donor. So I know we've got a couple things here at play, which you'll dig into, which is retention rates, like you said, within these segments, which may be different. I mean, you've got everybody. Then you've got people who are new to you, the people who have been with you maybe from 1 to 3 years, and then also different segments by the type and size of donation, as well as the length of the relationship.
Yeah, that's right. And this is just really fascinating to see everybody's responses in here. There's lots we can talk about.
Okay, well, take it away, James.
Let's do it. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to dive in. One of the things that I love about this series is that it draws people, and about your work, Jay, is it draws people from some of the biggest nonprofits out there down to, maybe one person teams. And so what I'm going to try to do today in the presentation is I'm going to try to talk to the average person on the call. And then as we get into questions, we'll pause 2 or 3 times for questions. I'll take more specific, go a little bit deeper for where you are. But I want the presentation to speak to the big billion-dollar organizations in the room and some of the organizations that maybe have a budget of $250,000. So let's dive in. Okay. The problem, we all know it. You wouldn't be listening to this if you didn't realize it was a problem. Every piece of available data out there says the same thing, that nonprofits have a significant lapse donor problem. This isn't a little itty bitty, put it down number 5, 6, 7 on the task list type problem. This is the primary problem that nonprofits face in their fundraising programs. And we need to dive into how to fix it. Statistics, most of you know this. Every year, 55 to 60% of donors lapse from organizations. 55 to 60%. It is mind boggling. Okay. If you were a business, you would not stay in business long if you were losing customers at that rate. And I say this next thing not to be rude, but just to be very direct with everybody. If you're in line with the national average, that is not something to be proud about. I want to say that again. If your benchmark is the national average, hey, we want to be as good as everybody else out there, that is not something to be proud of. The national average is that bad that you need to shoot way over that if you want to substantially grow your fundraising dollars. Okay. And this has significant impact on your organizations. These are donors that you work hard to find, to cultivate, to steward. It represents hours of staff time from the digital marketing team to the people that are coordinating the rides and runs to the person putting on the gala or whatever events you do. This represents hundreds of hours of staff time. And all of that equates to it's costing you money, a lot of money, which Jay and I talked about in the beginning here. Some key things to know, some deep beliefs that I have. Number one, it does not have to be this way. Okay. I want to say that again. It does not have to be this way. This is not one of those assumptions that we as an industry, that we as a sector just have to live with. It doesn't have to be this way. It's in our power to change it. Number two, donor retention, at least in my opinion, is one of the main indicators of a successful fundraising program. It is at the top of my list. It is more important to me than dollars raised. Keeping your donors speaks so much to the health of your organization and your fundraising and marketing team. So let's jump in. Some more specifics here. Why donors lapse to begin with in organizations. And I think there are three main reasons why donors lapse from organizations. Now, some of you on the call might want to parse this out in more detail, but again, I'm speaking to the mean average here, so I'm going to keep this pretty broad so that it's actionable. Okay. The number one, not these aren't in order, by the way. They're not, top, middle, bottom. They're just the three reasons. But on my list, number one is life events. Okay. Loss of a job, a move, if you're a geographically focused organization, a sickness, a death in the family. These life events, there's really nothing that you can do to control. Okay, this is outside of your control. You can stay close to people when life events happen. You can support them through a loss of a job or a sickness or a death in the family, but you can't control it. So we're going to focus most of our time and attention on number two and number three. But with life events, no, you can't control it. You should stay close to those donors and support them as best you can. But really, it's outside of your control. The next two, however, are entirely within our control to change. Okay. Reason number two that donors lapse is they don't know where their money is going. If you call them 3, 6, 9 months later and say, hey, do you know exactly where that $10,000 you gave us went? Most of them will say, no, I have no idea where that money is going. I don't know what it did in the world. And I'm kind of dissatisfied by that. I run a test every January. Every January at our company, I take some of our profits from the year before and I divvy it out about 15 to 20 nonprofits a year and give them each a few $100 because I'm curious to see what their response is. And you would be shocked how many of them, one, never communicate back, don't get a thank you, don't get an impact report, don't get added to a newsletter. And then two, you would be shocked how many send an initial thank you, and then I don't hear from them for 6, 7, 8 months afterwards. Now, I'm not ticked off by that because I did it kind of to see what nonprofits were doing. But if I was a donor giving out of a deep sense of passion for the issues that you're solving in the world, giving out of a deep sense of passion for the cause that you have in the world, and you don't communicate back to me, all of that passion and all of that joy that I had when I wrote the check or when I submitted the electronic payment online, all of that's gone. And people say it takes a lifetime to build trust and a moment to lose it. And when nonprofits aren't communicating back, we're losing that trust. Okay, so reason number one, life event. Reason number two, they don't know where their money is going. Reason number three, I've always found this to be interesting. They don't know that they've lapsed. I'll say it again. Many lapsed donors don't know that they've actually lapsed. I've done quite a few surveys for organizations that I've worked at or clients that we serve. And when you call and do a lapsed donor survey and you ask, hey, why have you lapsed? They don't actually know they have. They say, oh, I gave a gift 5 months ago. I gave a gift 6 months ago. And then you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, would it shock you to know that your last gift was actually in August of 2021? And they're embarrassed by this. People have so much going on in their lives that you're not the top thing on their mind, and they forget that they haven't given again. And this is absolutely within our control to change. An example that I like to give here. We've had quite a few snow days where I live in Maryland, in suburban Washington. And every time our kids have a snow day or a 2 hour delay, or today they had a half day, do you know how many emails and text messages I get reminding me either to make sure I get my kids when it's a half day or not drop them off when there's a 2 hour delay or a snow day? I counted this, I get between 9 and 11 every time there's something changed at school. Okay, 9 and 11 messages, text messages, auto, recorded phone call, voice message things, emails. Now, I think for most people, we would agree that our kids are kind of, the most important things in our lives. And especially when they're small, our job is to keep them alive, like literally. And I have one kid that's still in that small age. And if the school, after its decades of experience working with parents, has realized we actually have to send 9, 10, 11 messages so mom and dad and auntie and grandma pick up, little Susie from school. How many more messages do we have to send as a sector to people who aren't trying to keep us alive and maybe think about us every few weeks or few months? Third reason why donors don't actually know that they've lapsed. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide the rest of this into two sections. The first section is going to be how to keep donors from lapsing in the first place. Because I don't think there's a lot of utility. I tend to be a really pragmatic person. I don't think there's a lot of utility in talking about how we re-engage and reactivate lapsed donors if they're just going to lapse again. So let's fix the problem. Let's stop donors from lapsing and then talk about some strategies that we can use to bring them back. And then at the end of this, how do we stop them from lapsing section? I'm going to open up the chat box and answer some of your questions. I see some of them coming in already in different comments, and we'll get to that at the end of this first section. So let's talk about how we can keep donors from lapsing in the first place. And I want to talk about trust some more, and something I call the trust triangle. Trust is, my first mentor doing this told me, trust is the coin of the realm, and the coin of the realm is broke. This was a British guy, so it stuck with me ever since. In our whole society, we have a trust deficit, and that's only accelerating, which makes the job of building trust between your nonprofit, your institution, and your givers much harder to do. And there are multiple angles on trust, and you need to get all of these right, okay? So a donor who gives a first-time gift, they need to trust you in 3 areas before they'll make a second gift, okay? The first is just your organization. Do they trust your organization? Do you have a track record of success? Are you showing them, like we just talked about, what you're doing with their money? Are you showing them that you have the leadership and administrative capabilities to steward their gift wisely? Okay. So they trust the organization. Number 2, do they trust your leadership? And when I say leadership, I mean, really, do they trust the CEO or executive director? Do they trust the board? Is the top leadership of the organization showing donors that they're transparent, that they're capable, that they know what they're doing? And then third, your impact. Can you actually show them through data? And okay, I'm not talking about foundations and big corporations. I'm talking about, individual donors. Can you show them in some really high level ways that you are bringing measurable change to the areas that you're seeking to change in the world? There's some ways that we can do this, how we can build this trust. First, and these get more specific as they go. First, I would say you need to use the 80-20 rule. All of your content that you're sending out, and I think you should be sending out quite a lot of content. Content is still king in the world of marketing and fundraising. should follow this 80-20 rule. 80% of it needs to be deep content that drives value for your audience, education, impact stories, thought leadership pieces. And only 20% of that should be fundraising asks. And I'm not talking, hey, in this email, 80% is value driven and 20% is an ask. I'm saying that 80% of the total content pieces should be value driven. It should be content that is interesting, that's engaging, that gives the donor something that they really care about. And then 20% should be fundraising asks. This ratio helps keep donors engaged without making them feel like they're your ATM machine or your Zelle button that just keeps transferring cash into the organization. Okay. In order to keep those three elements of trust in there, there are three types of content that I think really work well. The first, and I hope everybody knows this, is impact stories. Okay. These are stories of the program participants, the end users of your organization's mission, and show kind of before, during, after stories. Donors love impact stories. We should be telling more of them and tell those stories better. I think we just did one of these masterminds with Emily on storytelling a few weeks ago. Go back and listen to that if you haven't. She's an expert storyteller. The second thing, second type of content I think you need is thought leadership pieces that demonstrate your expertise. Do you have people inside your organization? Do you have leaders inside the organization that can demonstrate expertise by taking a particular point of view on a topic? For example, I come from the humanitarian and social service sector, and I worked in refugee resettlement and immigrant services for a really long time, for about 10 years. And obviously, those are things being talked about in the news and in political conversations now. And so we had to put out thought leadership pieces that took a definitive point of view on some issues so that our audience knew that we knew what we were talking about in a sea of misinformation and confusion. Sorry if that got a little bit political, but that's just my background. And then third, behind the scene glimpses that build deep connections. Okay. Every nonprofit I talk to wants a glossy, high polished, produced video. Do you know what types of videos perform better? Videos that you take on your iPhone, selfie videos. They perform great right now. A little bit more rugged, a little bit more authentic. Just when your staff is out in the field or you're walking down the halls of your educational institution and you see something that donors paid for, a quick picture, a quick video of that, saying thanks. Something that happens in the office that's really cool, that the donors would be engaged with and would like. I include in here glimpses of your donors as well. If your audience is donors, tell stories of other donors and how their participation in your organization has changed their life and has changed their family. You need those types of stories to really build trust and to sustain trust with your audience. Okay, so how do you do that though? How do you operationalize the building of that trust? The first thing I'll say here, and for some of you, this is going to be really basic, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And I think this is factually accurate. Of all the clients we've served in the past 18 months, about 25, 30 of them, only one has had a welcome series before we started working with them, okay? So a welcome series. It's an automated, I usually say 7-part email series for every new donor you get. So a first-time donor, no matter what level, it triggers this automatic welcome series that, the first week they're getting 2 emails, the second week 2 more emails, maybe an email a week after that. And then they get looped into your normal communications cadence. This helps to fend off buyer's remorse from the moment they give. People, when they give money, people, when they buy something, they intuitively think, oh, was that a good decision afterwards? You can help them to answer that question in an affirmative way by sending them this welcome series. And in that welcome series, you just go back. Is there, I would start with an impact story or two. Give them a thought leadership piece. Give them some behind the scenes glimpses, in that, and automate it. Okay, put it into MailChimp, put it into whatever CRM system you have, and do that for them. There's a lot of data out there to suggest that when you do this, small and mid-sized donors often will give a second gift very quickly afterwards, which shows that you've built trust with them. And here's some additional really compelling data. AFP has reported that donors who just give a one-time gift, only 19% of them will give again. But over 63% of donors who give a second gift will continue to donate. The reason that I highlight the welcome series is that many of these donors will give again within 2 to 3 months. Okay. And your odds of keeping them for a long time when it jumps from 19% to 63%, I mean, you couldn't be, that's a huge increase in the potential of retention. And you can control that by doing a great welcome series. You also have to do your thank yous and all of that as well. But if you automate it, you're already on your way to seeing retention increase, okay? By getting that golden gift, that second gift from a donor. So if you're out there today and you don't have a welcome series, whether you're $1 billion institution or a $250,000 institution, I think your first, task list after this is to create that welcome series and try to get more second gifts from folks. Then people often ask, okay, once we do that welcome series, how often should donors hear from us? I often hear people in the nonprofit space very concerned that they are going to be communicating too much to their donors, and it's going to cause their donors to unsubscribe from their email list. In fact, the opposite thing is happening. We're not updating our people enough, and they're forgetting who we are, and they're unsubscribing because we haven't told them enough of what their money went to do. So I say at a minimum, you should hear from, or your donors should hear from you at least 2 times a month via email. And these can be, newsletters. They can be all the content types we talked about, thought leadership pieces, impact stories, behind the scenes glimpses. They should be seeing you on social media. You should be inviting them to in-person or virtual events. They should be hearing from you a minimum of twice a month, okay? And I would say as you build that muscle, if you're smaller, you need to, twice a month for a year, then 3 times a month, then potentially every week. And remember, these aren't all asks. 80% of it is value-driven content that adds value to your donor. 20% are asks. I think if you do this, you're going to see retention go up pretty dramatically. You can add to this what I like to call the wow factor. Random, out of the blue, personal communication. Just, hey, well, let me say this. Wow factor, one of my favorite things to do in this is it's always the fundraising team, right, that are writing the thank you letters. What if, every once in a while, a donor got a note from one of your program staff or one of your professors or one of your doctors, if you're in a hospital system, and it just said, hey, James here, I'm a professor, I'm a doctor, I work on the field with so-and-so, and I realize every single day that I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do and see the change that I see if it wasn't for you and people like you. I just wanted to say thanks so much. People are accustomed to the fundraiser writing them a thank you note. People are semi-accustomed to the CEO doing it, but have a random person that they wouldn't expect to hear from. Write the email, make a video, send a handwritten note. Thanks so much. Here's what we did with your money. It'll go such a long way to build trust, and they won't be expecting it, which is even more fun. Another thing I like to do is give people giving statements, especially longer term donors. Why not send out, here's how much you've given this year, so they know. One of my favorite things to do when I was, in-house was finding the donors who'd given consistently for 25, 30 years. Maybe it was a few $100 a year, maybe it was a set $75 a month. adding all of that up and just calling them and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, do you know that over the past 30 years, you've given 400 grand to this organization, and here's what we did with it? Most of the donors don't actually know they've made that kind of impact. And then personal contact. I want to keep moving fast here so we get into how to re-engage lapsed donors. But I'm going to pause before we go into how to win donors back and take any questions that you all have in the chat box. And I'm going to quickly read through this. But I wanted to, just as a reminder, start with how do you prevent donors from lapsing in the first place so that when we get to how to win them back, you're not winning them back into a broken system. So I'm going to read through some of these. If you have questions, put them in. I think I'll probably take 2, 3, 4 of them right now, if you have them. Somebody said they missed the first reason that people lapse. The first reason is a life event, a job loss, a move, a sickness, a death.
And James,
Yeah,
I don't know
of
if you can see that we have actually several in the Q&A, but there was one that also was in the chat about HIPAA, saying that one of the barriers to stories is HIPAA. How would we share when we have to protect personal information?
You know what, Jay? That is a great question. And I think every sector has some version of HIPAA, right? I mean, obviously the health sector is different, but when you're working with kids, you can't share that story without permission. You have to do it in a good way. When you're working with refugees and immigrants, especially in today's climate, you don't want their face and their name out there if there's retribution type stuff. I think in those instances, you need to, you know, ask permission, get consent forms, all of that, or protect people's privacy when it comes to, hey, a person, and you put an asterisk by their name and you kind of maybe mix 2 or 3 stories together. There is a great, if you're in the healthcare space, a great book called Stories That Stick. And one of the chapters is all about fundraising for hospitals and healthcare organizations. So I would recommend that to the person who asked that. So some questions here. When you say we need to be giving the donors content that they want 80% of the time, can we include a donation ask at the bottom of the email or not include anything about a donation? It's a great question. I would say that once, and it depends on how well you have historically communicated. If you haven't communicated well, I would say give it a few months before you add that give now button on the bottom of the email. But if you've been trucking along for a while, then I would say put the give now button there, but don't make that an emphasis. So again, if you haven't been communicating well, don't put it until you've started communicating well for 2 or 3 months. But if you have been communicating well, I would put it there. That's a great clarification question. Next question here is our donors are usually immediately put on our marketing email list and receive all of our marketing emails, sometimes a couple a week. Is this too much? I'm wondering if we need to segment our donors from our other members. That's a great question. And I think there are probably if you're 2 ditches that people fall in. Okay, think of a bowling alley and you have the gutter on each side, and you can fall off either side. One side that I see people falling into is when somebody gives, especially I see this with major donors, they take them off all the automated email communications. And that could not be, I can't emphasize this more. That's like the worst thing you can possibly do. Those are the people that need the most communication from you. Now, on the other side of the ditch is people just send everything and they're not segmenting for an audience that hasn't given yet. Maybe you have a lot of volunteers, or I see this a lot with environmental, like nature centers. They have a whole list of people who are coming and doing hikes and things like that, but haven't given yet. You need to segment that out so your acquisition list, your member list, your donor list is getting constant stuff, but they're getting the right stuff for them. If a major donor is getting, hey, give $50 a month email solicitations, not great. But if they're not getting your newsletter, if they're not getting your stories of impact, also not great because your major gift officer can't communicate with every donor every single. So you really do need to segment that out and create the right communications treatment. Then the final question we have here is, what formula do you use to calculate retention? So specifically, what is an active donor? I'm going to tell you two answers to that question. The first answer is I just use, because I'm a simple kind of guy, and most organizations can't deal with too much complexity. I use a calendar year basis. Did they give in 2023 and then stopped? Didn't give again in 2024? Okay, they elapsed. That's the simplest way to do it on a calendar year basis or a fiscal year basis. The other is a rolling 365 days. Say they gave a gift on January, what day is today? 23rd. They would be lapsed January 24th, 2026, if they haven't given again. I like to keep it really simple like that. The other thing that I tell people all the time is if your CRM has a built-in retention calculator on it, I am a-okay with you using that because I know that changing that and getting data out is like pulling your molars out with a pair of pliers. So if your CRM has one built in, use that one. But if it doesn't, I generally use it a year, either a calendar year or a rolling year to make things easier for myself and teams to do. Now, I think there's some additional questions in the chat. I want to make sure I just take a quick glance at them. Any recommendations for a tiny team of 2 people? Start small. Build your welcome series out, okay? Because once you build that, you can kind of automate that and forget it. And then I would say really focus on 2 communication pieces per month. And then I would say segment out your major donors and give them special attention and special solicitations. I would, if you're a team of 2 or an organization of 2, scale it down to what you can actually do. Don't try to be and do all the things like a $100 million organization if you're a small team. Do what's right for you and take these principles and apply them. Another question is, how involved is your board? We're going to get to board here in a little bit. I do think that boards need to be involved in this, but I think we need to do that really well. And okay, we're going to go back to the presentation now because I think we answered all those questions. Thanks for that engagement, guys. That's really helpful to see what you are thinking about. Okay, so let's go. Get my screen sharing again, to our winning back strategy. We've already talked about how to keep donors from lapsing. Let's implement that, and then let's go back and get these 55, 60% of people that have left every single year, okay? The first thing I would do here is dashboard creation, okay? Create a dashboard that alerts you when somebody is about to lapse and has lapsed. And that way, you know, okay, it's time to go get them back. Okay. And again, because I'm simple and I really believe that things need to be actionable, I use a very simple color coding system. You know, green, everything's a go. Yellow, oops, we got to slow down now. And red, we got to stop and figure out how we go and get this person back. Okay. There are more sophisticated ways to do it, but I'm not always sure that sophisticated leads to success, especially for the smaller and mid-size organizations. Okay. And then what I'm going to do here is I am going to go through and I'm going to show you 7 or 8 ways that I have seen work to help you win lapsed donors back. Okay. The first thing that I do is try to build out different segments as I go after lapsed donors. And I actually, if you've never done a lapsed donor campaign or trying to win them back, I would recommend going back 7 to 10 years. Now, it's very true that if you go back that far, you're going to have much more success winning people back that lapsed a year, 2, 3 years ago than 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. But it doesn't mean you're going to be completely unsuccessful going back 7 to 10 years. And I always think it's worth a shot, especially if it's digital and email communications. You're already doing the work. Why not expand the list just a little bit? And then I would build different segments. Okay. I would, if you don't already, I would use a tool like DonorSearch, and DonorSearch is my preferred mechanism for doing well screenings. I would go through my lapse list and say, okay, who are our major donor potentials here? And I make a list of them. Sometimes you know because they were giving major gifts before. Sometimes you don't know because they were giving smaller and medium-sized gifts. So you want to do that well screen when you're voting your segments out. So I would get a major list, and then I would get a list of annual funded mid-level. In the beginning of this, you're going to treat them the same, but then based on your different segments, you're going to add additional touch points later on. Okay. Now I want to talk about the touch points. Most people underestimate the number of touch points needed to win back a lapsed donor. And I have found that to win back a lapsed donor, you need a variety of touch points, about 16 to 20 on average over the course of a calendar year. Okay. Some of you are saying, oh my gosh, that's way too many. And the answer that I would give to that is, yeah, it's a lot. But do you want to be successful? Or do you want to just say that you did some work? If you really want to be successful, you need to give this a year to work. I tell people, plan to launch your lapse donor campaign in February. Okay. Why? Because December is the biggest giving month. 40% of all the donations are thereabout coming in December. In January, we all know it takes a while for the post office to deliver the checks and to run the data. But in February, plus or minus one or two people who lapsed, who didn't give before. We know right now or next week who lapsed in 2024, and we can do something about it. And I would plan to run that lapse donor campaign all the way through December 31st of that year. Okay, give it that full 11 months to run it. And those touch points, let's talk about what some of those touch points can be. Okay. And these are not in any order. You'll need to build this order out based on your capability, based on your content team. But I would say, by and large, my favorite touch point is what I call a since your last gift report. Okay. This is a well-designed 3 to 4 page customized report, literally letting donors know how you've used their money since the last time they gave. Now, why do I think this is such a great tool to use? Let's go back and remember the 3 reasons donors lapse. 1, a life event. 2, they didn't think you let them know where their money went. And 3, they don't know when they're lapsed. This since your last gift report touches on all 3. If they had a life event 5 years ago and they've evened out now, this is a great way to re-engage them. Okay. If they've passed away, that's different. You can't re-engage them. But if it was a move, a sickness, a job loss, they might be back on their feet now. Hey, Jay, this is how I used that. This is how we used that money you gave us 5 years ago. So you're hitting number 1. Number 2, you're letting them know exactly where their money went. You're sharing stories. You're casting vision. Your CEO is going to write a letter as part of this. You're letting them know exactly where their money went. And number 3, remember the 3rd reason? People don't know they lapsed. You're going to gently put in there, hey, Jay, since your last gift in August of 2022, here's what we've done with this. And if Jay is like a lot of people, he's going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I haven't given since 2022. He won't know. And you'll tell him very, very, very politely and very gently, and also show him where his money went at the same time. I love a since your last gift report. It really works very well. Surveys also work very well. Another touch point you can do. And you can do this on a postcard. You can do this digitally. With the since your last gift report, I would often say like mid-level and up donors would get a snail mail to them, and smaller donors would get an email to them. Same with the survey approach. Ask them some questions. What first compelled you to make a gift? What did you love most about the work that we did together? Why did you stop giving? And would you be willing to give again? Some open-ended questions there. If you have a more sophisticated fundraising shop, you can add some, 1 through 5 or 1 through 10, type questions in there. But short is the key. I fly a lot, and I was on a Southwest flight last week, and they sent me a survey afterwards, and I was kind of sitting on the airplane, waiting to go back home. I was like, yeah, I'll fill out their survey and help them out. But after I got through like question 27, I was like, I'm done. I would have answered 10, 15 questions for him. I wouldn't answer 100 questions for him. So make your survey short, so you don't have guys like me ending it midway, while they're taxiing to the gate. Surveys are a great way. CEO communication. Okay, remember the ways to build trust. CEOs giving updates to your lapse donors is a great way to build trust. Okay. And I have a edit challenge here in my PowerPoint. I'm sorry about that. But then, stories of impact. We already talked about that. Since your last gets report, surveys, and just keep communicating to them. Keep it up. A lot of times organizations will take lapse donors off the email list. So they will not have gotten quite a few things that you've sent over a year or two. Re-engage them with that. Put them back on the mailing list. Those types of things. Invite them to a virtual event just for them. If you have a new CEO, invite them to a virtual event or an in-person event if you're a geographically focused organization, and invite them back into that. And then once you get 5, 6, 7 touch points in, start asking. Start asking gently, and then make the ask more direct. And you can even tell them, at touch point 7, 8, 9 directly, we want you back. We want to win you back as a donor. We want to win back your trust. Will you join us again? People respond really well to that. If you have a list of major donors, what I would do is you're building out your year-end campaign, or not your year-end, your lapse donor campaign, sorry, is I would automate the first 5, 6, 7 touch points. If they reactivate and quote unquote, pop, and start giving again, that's wonderful. Put them into, your newly acquired major donor process, put them in your welcome series again, have the major gift officer start reaching out. Chances are that the major gift officers stop giving for more complex reasons. What I would then do after 7, 8, 9 touch points is I would start sprinkling in some very personalized things. A handwritten note from the CEO, direct emails to them from major gift officers trying to get meetings with them. And I would really quote unquote pound the pavement in that way to win some of your major givers back. I had a staff member one time, her name is Lauren, and we were doing, this was in 2021, I believe. Yeah, 2021. And we were doing a lapse donor campaign, and it was growing amazingly. Lauren was a major gift officer, still is in Atlanta for that organization. And the campaign was going great, but Lauren wasn't loving the campaign because her donors were not activating as quickly as everybody else's. And I remember one day I was out like on an afternoon walk, and Lauren called me, and she was half laughing and half crying. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" This was still during COVID, and she literally was like 17, and I was like, "What in the world?" 17 touch points, James, is what she was laughing and crying through. And a major donor had written her a $150,000 check after touch point number 17. Okay, don't give up. Follow through with the rest of your plans. And that donor went on to then give 300 and then 500 the subsequent 2 years. Lauren was a happy camper after that. Okay, does this really work? Yes. Okay. I just mentioned Lauren in that campaign. At that organization called World Relief, we had reactivated donors worth 1.5 million. at the end of our 11-month campaign. Okay. 1.5 million, whether you're a big organization or a small one, is not something to shake a stick at. Okay. 1.5 million bucks is 1.5 million bucks. Many of them became monthly donors, which was really interesting. Our lapse donor communication and campaign in many ways became the future kind of center of what we sent out to everybody because it was so effective. Some additional benefits here. Most of those donors were designated donors before they lapsed. It was a geographically dispersed organization, 27 unique offices around the country. And some of those offices had to close for reasons outside of our control. Again, refugee resettlement, getting into politics here, don't want too much of that. And the donors were upset because their office in their backyard had closed. When those donors came back, almost all of them started giving undesignated gifts. So from restricted gifts to an office, to an undesignated gift to a global organization. Amazingly great benefits for that organization. And I don't think you need to be a big organization in multiple countries and multiple cities to do this. I think if you're in Cincinnati or Cleveland or Portland, Maine, or some of the other places that I've seen you come into this training from, that you can do the same thing. None of these things are hard to do. And I think that most of you can do it. We're going to take some questions here in a second, but I want to finish by saying this. If you're like most nonprofits, you are sitting on a gold mine. You're sitting on a gold mine of lapsed donors who you really need to work to reactivate. You're sitting on a gold mine of current donors who you need to work to keep from lapsing. And you're sitting on a gold mine because I imagine most people haven't done a thorough wealth screen of their list yet to figure out who their major gift prospects are. And I don't care what you read in the news about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Mackenzie Scott, the way to really grow your nonprofit is working with major givers, individual major donors, small family foundations, and tools like DonorSearch help us with that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to take some of your questions. And Jay is back as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. Yes, please don't go away because we have a whole bunch of questions and we may have a couple minutes for more. So if you have questions that have come to your mind during the course of James's sharing, go ahead and put them in maybe the Q&A now so we don't miss them. And James, one question we had is just a logistical one, which is the slides. May we share those for you?
Absolutely. I will send you an email with them, Jay, and then share them out.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. And just to let everybody know, in case you have not been through this before with the series, we will send out an email to you. That email will contain a link then to a recording of the session as well as to the slides. So just be on the lookout for that in the next 2 days. We also will have a survey that appears as soon as you leave today. So whether you leave in the next 30 seconds or the next 10 minutes, please fill that out. James talked about the importance of surveys, and we all know that short surveys can bring great results if we pay attention to the results of the survey. We do. So whatever you want to see and hear this year is exactly what you'll get. We have 150 sessions in our 3 shows this year, and we need to be guided by you. So please go ahead and fill that out. It's our best indicator of what your needs and your interests are. And if that isn't enough for you, just write me a note. My email address is that's Jay, at DonorSearch.net. You can write me a note anytime. Just let me know what you want to see and hear. We also have things coming up this week. So again, as you're writing these questions, I'll just hit you with these quickly. In the PM podcast, which is the new name of the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, the PM podcast, we have Peyton McGriff, founder of She and one of the top 5 CNN heroes of 2024. That's already up there for you. So go ahead and give that a listen. And this weekend, we have Heidi Johnson, author of Change for Good, that's going to be dropped onto your favorite podcasting platforms, as well, of course, as the DonorSearch website and the DonorSearch YouTube channel. Next Thursday, we have a session with Linda Lizakowski, one of the few ACFREs in the country, about building relationships that lead to major gifts. It'll be a great companion to what James is sharing today. And then finally, next Tuesday, We both have Devin Thorpe, the author of How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding, and a discussion of the new executive orders and their impact on you. So with that, James, let's go back to the questions.
Okay, well, that sounds like an amazing lineup, and I know where I'm tuning in now. And as a Jay and I, you and I are both from the greater Washington region, and there's been a lot of executive orders this week. We're not used to this many, I'll say that.
Yes, there have.
Yep. Okay, let's get back to some of these questions. We are a small children's museum. Even though we're not curing cancer, we feel our mission of play together is vital in today's culture. Um, Mental health goals there too. How do you recommend we position ourselves to get the highest return in our donor asks? Hey, that's a great question. A little bit off topic for today, so let me reframe my brain real quick. But I don't think you need to compare yourself to curing cancer. Okay, we are living through the greatest mental health crisis, at least in a generation, maybe of all time, right? COVID was not great for our mental health. Isolation, our devices are not great for our mental health. Our politics are not great for our mental health. One of our clients is the largest outdoor school in the country. They take kids to the Chesapeake Bay for a week-long social emotional learning and outdoor education. And their big thing is these kids are not healthy coming out of the pandemic. I think you message that. And yeah, if you want more on that, you want to go deeper, you can reach out to Jay, you can reach out to me, and we can, talk about your unique situation. But don't try to be somebody else, Heather. Be exactly who you are, fixing the problems that you fix, and be bold and direct in that. Hope that's helpful. On this. This is from Autumn. Can you talk more about the types of thought leadership you recommend, please? Okay, let's just use Heather's example. Heather or her CEO, if she is a CEO, should absolutely write a thought leadership piece about the effects of the pandemic and post-pandemic era on kids, and should talk about why that's happening, the reasons why it's happening, and the things that the world, medicine, and psychologists tell us can help kids. So that's one example. If you're working in the refugee space or immigration space, you need to be writing thought leadership pieces right now. Somebody asked a HIPAA question. If you work for a FQHC, a federally qualified health center, you need to be writing about the importance of vaccines right now. These are all thought leadership pieces. You should be talking about whatever it is that you do, taking a very strong point of view on it and sending that out to your audience. Really anything you can create a thought leadership piece about. People love a good think piece. The internet is full of think pieces. So hopefully that helps, Autumn, with just a few examples. Next question, anonymous. What kinds of things do you include in the since your last gift report? Statistics, graphs, pictures, stories, something else? If you're old enough, anonymous questioner, to remember standardized tests that you used to fill in with pencils, there was always option D, all of the above. And that is the answer to your question, all of it. A letter from the CEO, stories, stories, stories. You need some high-level statistics and probably some infographics, and you're good to go. Don't limit yourself to one medium. A great newsletter or since your last gift report has all kinds of stuff: interviews, stories, sidebar boxes, did you know sections. So the answer there is D, all of the above. And then Evelina, we're in the midst of a founder's transition. The founder is still quite involved in the organization. It's the relationship with this couple that was the impetus for Donors First Gifts. During the transition time, do you think that this type of communication will build trust with the organization or diminish trust with the new ED? That is a great question. We are working with 3 organizations right now that are going through ED or executive order, CEO transition. You can tell we're all thinking about this in Washington right now. I would say that if your outgoing and incoming can pair up together, the better off you will be. Okay. So many times, especially when the founder transitions, people wonder, will the organization keep going after this, especially if you're smaller? Ramping up that communication in advance of the transition, through it and after, I think is very wise and very helpful. And I don't think that it will diminish trust with the new executive director at all. I think that you guys should host some forums, whether in person or online, with both of these people together. And the one thing that I've learned managing a lot of these transitions is you need to be so clear on the process. Again, as a Washingtonian, process stories are what kill people. Okay, they really are. You don't want your donors thinking, did the founder get fired? Were they pushed out of the organization? Any of those? You need to be very clear about the process. Founder retired, resigned, etc. This day. The board put together a search committee. They spent this many times searching. They hired the search firm. Like, this is the one area that I actually think you should communicate specific details about. Usually I say don't get too detailed, but for a CEO or executive director transition, get really detailed, Evelina, in the process. Because if you don't fill in the blanks and tell the stories, everybody else's brain is going to do it for them. So, you know, ad nauseum detail to your CEO transition. Okay. Hopefully that happens. And great, Jay, that's all the questions we got. I think I got
well,
through
it's all
of
the
them.
questions for now. And if we've missed something, we apologize. There's been a lot of interaction here, which we deeply appreciate. And there can be more with James. So, James, how can people follow your work, get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, two ways. Number one, I am very active on LinkedIn. Just look for James Meisner on LinkedIn. I'm there. I post every day. I respond to all the direct messages myself. And the second is our website, thekiposgroup.com. And Kipos is KIPOS, thekiposgroup.com.
Thank you so much for all of this, James. Really great. And thank you, everybody, for being here and being a part of the conversation. It makes it so interesting when it's everybody jumping in, but it doesn't end here. Either with James, you can reach out to him, as he just said. We'll make sure that that information is included in the chat and the show notes, but also with the series. So fill out that survey if you would. And last reminder, join us next Tuesday and Thursday, as well as listen to the podcast when you take your walks through the neighborhood. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Our thanks again to our producer, Jack Frost, and to our sponsor, DonorSearch, without whom none of this would be possible. We'll look forward to seeing you all next time. Till then, take care.